welcome to the Situationship Expert YouTube channel. I am your host, India Lynn, also known as the Situationship Expert, first on TikTok, now on YouTube. Today's topic is something that I have definitely mentioned when I've gone live on my TikTok account, and I felt the need to bring it here because I wanted to expand a little bit more on it, and I am trying to truly create a library where people can go back and even share the information that I have previously spoken on my TikTok account. But today's topic is on boundaries and access, right? Boundaries and access. So if you are a single person, this is definitely for you. This is about creating healthy boundaries, and it's about the amount of access that someone has to you. So if you are, of course, in a relationship, or you feel like anything that I mentioned could be applicable to someone you know, definitely stick around. And if you feel it's helpful, share it with someone who you feel can use it. But again, my focus is on the singles today, but all are welcome to listen in. So when you first start dating someone, I would say this advice definitely applies within the first 2 months of dating. I'm not going to say that it couldn't apply within the first 90 days or that it doesn't apply within the first month per se. Oh, just give it more time. Like, no. Of course, use your own discretion on boundaries that need to be set. You might need boundaries set on day 1, day 2, day 3. But within the first couple of months of getting to know someone, I would strongly suggest setting appropriate boundaries for them because, again, this is someone that you don't fully know yet, and it's so important to protect yourself and your loved ones, okay? That being said, let's hop into boundaries, okay? But before I discuss boundaries and people accessing you, I want to discuss what I feel is so important, and it is called your sacred space. That's what I call it, your sacred space. And what do I mean by your sacred space? Your sacred space, in my opinion, are all of the intimate and very near and dear parts of who you are, okay? So anything of close value that is very personal to you, that should not be easily accessed by just anyone. And that's why it's so important to create healthy boundaries. What are some examples of what I mean by this? I would say, number one, the emotional side of things. I understand if you meet someone that you very much so like and you start opening up to them, and it's great when you feel like they've created a safe space for you to open up to them, where you typically might have your walls up, you might feel more guarded. Well, your walls are down with them. Beautiful when you open up to them, but be very careful about the personal information that you share with this person, because they are still a stranger. And as much as they might be the perfect person for you, shoot, they might be the one for you, right? Be careful. Take care of yourself. Too many incidents take place in terms of singles dating because they're not paying attention to their safety, right? And they're also not taking care of their security. And it starts with that emotional connection, that trust that you build with a person. Again, I'm not trying to slow down the progress of what could be a lifelong relationship. I'm simply trying to consider your best interest with this advice, okay? So take it with a grain of salt, and please understand that I'm truly trying to consider all of those factors, right? All right, so your emotional vulnerability, right? You can be honest, you can be open, you can share some things that are very important to you, and you might even love the fact that your walls are down, but please be careful with the sensitive information that you put out there. What is sensitive information? Where you work, where you live, where you travel regularly. That information should not be easily accessible to the person who you're speaking with. Now, if you feel comfortable mentioning the company and they don't know the details of where it's located, I'm not saying you should, be on edge about every little thing, but be mindful of those things. Another thing, if you happen to have children, mentioning your children's names, um, sensitive information about them. I'm just throwing that out there. Be very mindful of that. Okay. And that brings me to the next point, the physical access. Now, I'm not just talking about physical access to your body, I'm talking about physical access to you, period. Again, we mentioned locations in the last example, the first example, I should say, where you could potentially tell this person where your work address is. They shouldn't know your exact work address. Now, unless you're dating your coworker, um, I don't feel that person should have access to your work address immediately, for safety reasons again, or access to your address. Now, someone might say, well, it was late, I let him spend the night. I'm sorry, if you met someone and they are still considered a stranger to you in terms of not knowing them that long, why would you invite a complete stranger into your house? There have been incidents where people prematurely invited someone over to their home, and maybe the first night with them was fine, or they let them spend the night reluctantly or willingly, right? But the person ended up not being that great in terms of a potential boyfriend or girlfriend. Next thing you know, that person shows up again, or they show up at their job. I'm just telling you, be very, very careful within the first couple of months of getting to know someone. And also, um, again, the level of intimacy that you have with that person in terms of having physical access to you, but not just physical access to you in terms of, intimacy. Um, Early on, it's about the physical closeness that they have to your children. There are some people who will have a revolving door of boyfriends and girlfriends, or people in their life who are just in and out. And that does have an effect on your children as well. It's not just you being impacted by your dating experience, it is anyone who lives in your immediate family, or your roommates, or whomever it is that you're sharing space with. They're being affected by this too. Now, your roommates, maybe not so much, right? Maybe they're not a fan of having just anybody in the living room or in their space, at whenever you want to invite them in, right? But for everyone's safety, it's important to, again, monitor how close you're going to bring this person in. And it's not to say that you shouldn't get to know them. It's not to say that you can't invite somebody over, and maybe you do feel like, well, they're safe, or maybe you had certain instances where you knew the person for years and you're just starting to date on an intimate level, right? Or perhaps it's someone who you've been acquaintances with, and or you have mutual friends with, and you've heard good things about them, so you trust them more. But I'm simply trying to say, be careful, because again, you have no idea who you're dealing with on a deep level until, time marches on. And of course, time will tell. Time is one of the best dictators on who a person is in terms of consistency, because consistency is not just with your words, it's with your actions. That's how I judge consistency and character. It's the consistency of those two things matching and being in alignment. So that being said, be very careful with the access that you give to people, because it's very hard to revoke access to your home, to your job, to your children, to all the things that are close and intimate to you. And that's why I say, be very mindful of your sacred space. Be very mindful of the access that you give to people, because it's very hard to deny that access after they've already crossed that line. And some people might even try and justify why it's still okay for them to be in your life, or justify why they are still good enough, and they'll show up sometimes unannounced. Again, very difficult, and it gets pretty dicey if you have to get restraining orders involved. all this to say, please be careful when you're dating. Please be mindful when you're dating. And I know it's very exciting and exhilarating when you first get to know someone who you truly do connect with on a deep level. But be mindful of the timeline at the same time. Be mindful. Be very careful with giving out specific information. I do genuinely care about your safety, and I hope that whether you're dating or you know someone who's dating and you want them to have this information, please share that information with them if this advice is helpful in your opinion. All right, thank you for joining me on this episode of the Situationship Expert on YouTube. I'm not trying to deter anybody from dating. My hope is to encourage people, to give people hope for dating. But I do want us to be mindful and be careful, because at the same time, I don't want anything incredibly dangerous to take place if it could have been avoided. So that being said, please be careful and share this again with someone who you think may find this information helpful. Again, I am the Situationship Expert on YouTube. I appreciate you for joining, and until the next video, take care.